So before I was a trauma therapist and life coach, I was a trauma survivor, but I didn't become dysfunctional after the trauma. I became exceptional. And I know that's a really bold and weird thing to say, so let me explain what I mean. I'm not saying that the trauma made me better or that what happened to me is somehow a gift or that I'm grateful for the childhood abuse and neglect I experienced. I'm not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that I became exceptional at surviving it. And some of those qualities that people have admired most about me throughout my life were actually built in response, aka what I'm going to be calling adaptations today, to experiences I should have never had to navigate in the first place at a really young age. But I did become incredibly independent super early. I was responsible. I got good at reading people and anticipating problems and figuring things out and functioning even when things were super duper hard. And I learned how to keep going because I had no choice back then when I was a kid or teenager. And if you look at my life today without knowing my story, you probably wouldn't immediately think, oh, she's a trauma survivor. What you would probably see is an educated woman who's built a successful business, traveled the world, takes care of herself, is deeply passionate about her work, and has a lot of fun, is confident and smart, and has created this beautiful life that she loves. But you probably wouldn't see the little girl who grew up navigating childhood abuse and neglect. You wouldn't see the trauma that followed me into adulthood until I got help. You wouldn't see the C-PTSD diagnosis or the years of healing, or necessarily some of those experiences that still impact me to this day. Because trauma doesn't always look like dysfunction or mental health. Sometimes it looks like success. Sometimes it looks like the woman who everyone calls when something goes wrong because she's the one who can figure it out. Sometimes it looks like the coworker or employee who's always 3 steps ahead. It looks like the leader who never drops the ball. It looks like the entrepreneur who can make something out of nothing. It looks like the woman who never needs anyone or the strong one in the friend group. And here's the tricky part. Because those qualities are socially awarded and praised and promoted and admired and often financially compensated in the workforce, it can take a very long time for someone to realize that something underneath those qualities might be operating from survival, and that is what I want to talk about today. The unexpected strengths I and many women that I coach have developed because of trauma, what those strengths helped me personally create, and the cost that I eventually had to acknowledge when survival stopped being necessary, but my body and my brain and my behaviors didn't get the memo. And I think this conversation matters because we still have a very narrow cultural picture of what somebody who has experienced trauma is supposed to look like or sound like. We imagine someone visibly struggling, maybe someone who's had a very hard life, maybe someone who has mental health concerns, or a veteran with PTSD and flashbacks, or someone who's unable to work, or someone who takes medication, or someone who's unable to maintain a relationship. And trauma can absolutely look like that for some, but it doesn't always, because human beings adapt in different ways. And for some of us, the adaptation is not substance abuse or falling apart or severe mental health. It might be becoming someone who is frighteningly good at holding everything together. Because you learn very young that being prepared matters, that reading the room and predicting someone else's mood can actually prevent a problem, that being useful or not being too much or needing anything from anyone can keep you safe, and being independent keeps you from being disappointed and helps you get your needs met. And eventually you stop experiencing these things as adaptations and you mistake them for your personality. You think, no, I'm just a really driven person, or I'm really independent, or I've always been responsible. I work well under pressure. Maybe, and also, why? Why is that the case? That's the question I became so much more interested in as a trauma therapist and then as a trauma-informed coach. Not just what do you do, but what is driving you to do it? Because 2 people can demonstrate the same exact behavior for completely different psychological reasons. One woman can work incredibly hard because she loves what she is building and she has really good boundaries. And another can work incredibly hard because slowing down makes her feel anxious or makes her feel irrelevant or guilty or unsafe. And from the outside, both women look ambitious, but internally, they're having completely different experiences. And if you're trying to build a successful life, that distinction actually matters because there's a huge difference between ambition that comes from desire and ambition that comes from survival. When I look back on my life, I can very clearly see that my experiences forced me to develop skills very early on that I probably otherwise wouldn't have. I became resilient with little resources. I learned how to problem solve. I developed a abnormal tolerance for discomfort. I became very perceptive at a young age. I learned how to read subtle cues in people. I learned how to keep moving even when things were painful or when there wasn't a lot of hope. And those qualities, I'm not going to lie, have served me. I would be lying or pretending if they didn't. And some of my success, especially early on, were absolutely influenced by the fact that I had to learn to figure things out and that I can push through discomfort. But eventually, I had to confront another truth, that just because a survival strategy produced a positive result initially, that did not mean that it was free, because being incredibly good at anticipating problems can look like strategic thinking, but also can mean your brain never shuts off. Being independent can help you build an incredible life and make it really difficult to receive support. Having a high tolerance for discomfort can make you resilient and can cause you to stay in situations long after you should have left. Being able to read everyone around you can make you emotionally perceptive and mean you spend an enormous amount of energy monitoring and managing other people. And being the person who can always handle more eventually means people start giving you more at work, in your family, in your relationships, and sometimes friendships, and now you're the overfunctioner and they're enabled to underfunction. Because the world learns to depend on these very adaptations you created at one point where you had no other choice, but now might not be necessary anymore. And that is where the gift and the cost of childhood trauma sometimes become intertwined. And this is one of the most fascinating things I've heard called high functioning trauma. Eventually, your adaptations become so well practiced that neither you or the people around you necessarily recognize them anymore. They are just how you start to see yourself and how others start to see you. Like, you become the responsible one. You become the strong friend. You become the one who no one needs to check up on because you got it. You're the person who handles pressure well and is incredibly ambitious. And again, none of those traits are inherently bad. That is an important distinction. I don't want to pathologize every positive trait that someone has and trace it back to trauma or chronic stress or adverse experiences. But sometimes you are organized because you like being organized, or you're ambitious because you genuinely love your work. And sometimes it's deeper than that, and it will catch up with you eventually. So the question is not, did trauma cause this? A more useful question is, do I still have choice around this? Do I have choice on how I'm operating and how I'm responding? Like, can you rest without becoming anxious? Can you ask for help when you need it? Can you disappoint someone and still know that that was the best choice for you? Can you allow something to go out being imperfect? Can you receive care instead of always being the one who automatically provides it? Can you be misunderstood without immediately trying to fix someone's perception of you? Can you feel uncertain without compulsively trying to fix, manage, or monitor other people? Like, that is where we can start really differentiating a strength from a survival strategy. A strength is something that you use when it serves you. It's a skill set you have. A survival strategy feels like something you have to do in order to be okay. And sometimes the behavior looks identical from the outside, but again, we have to check in on the internal intention, because that's going to be what changes the experience for you. So let me go to the research really quickly. You guys know I love to nerd out just a little bit. So one of the things we understand about trauma is that the brain and the nervous system are adaptive. So they are constantly learning from our lived experience. So if your environment teaches you that unpredictability is dangerous, your system may become very good at anticipating what comes next to keep you safe. So it gets trained that way. Another example might be if mistakes historically come with consequences that are hurtful or painful, perfectionism can start making a lot of sense. Or if depending on people repeatedly results in disappointment and your needs not getting met, hyperindependence becomes super protective and makes absolute sense. So again, your system is essentially learning this works, so do more of this. And again, because some of these adaptations produce outcomes that society and workspaces and relationships reward, they can become especially difficult to identify or disrupt or even let go of. You know, I sometimes refer to this with my clients as the trauma drive, right? When survival-based adaptations early on become fuel for achievement later on in life. It's like, I just want to create the life I've always wanted. And initially, that survival is very powerful fuel, right? For anybody. But it can only take you so far because it's not sustainable long-term. At some point, your nervous system is going to start sending you a bill, and there are going to be costs associated with it. Maybe that looks like burnout. Maybe it's low-grade anxiety or depression. Maybe it's relationship issues or unexplainable health issues or tension. Feeling like you've created everything you've wanted and you've worked so hard for, and then feeling like you can't enjoy it is not fun. Trust me, I've been there, and that can be so confusing for high achievers. You know, for me, I think one of the hardest moments in my own growth growth was recognizing that you can create an awesome life and still have a nervous system that is waiting for something bad to happen. Like you can't actually enjoy it. You can make more money, you can travel, get the title, the house, the relationship, and there's still this voice in your head saying, don't get comfortable. Something could happen. You're not there yet. Don't let your guard down. Work harder. And if you do not understand what's happening on a psychological level, the obvious solution is obviously do more, because maybe the next income goal is what's going to help you feel secure. Maybe the next promotion is what's going to help you feel like enough. Maybe when your business gets to this level, you'll finally be able to relax. Or when you have this amount of money in your 401k, when you reach the milestone, when you get the house, then you can chill. But then here's what happens. And I'm pretty sure most of you can identify with this. You reach it and you feel good for what? 5 minutes, and then your brain moves the finish line to something else. That is when you have to start asking yourself a more uncomfortable question. So something along the lines of, what if the external achievement was never capable of creating the internal feeling that I was asking it to give me, that I was expecting it to give me, that I was hoping it would give me? Because here's what I learned the hard way. No amount of success, y'all. No amount of success can heal a nervous system by itself. Money can't teach your body to be safe. Achievement can't teach you to think that you're worth it. A title can't teach you to trust yourself. Control can't guarantee that nothing bad will ever happen again. These circumstances, these changes, these things that you work so hard to create in your life can help, but at some point, the work has to move to the inside. And this is also why generic advice for high achievers really falls flat. Like, I never give my clients this simplistic advice like, oh, just slow down or take a day off or do some self-care. Like, sure, those things are important, but if slowing down activates someone's anxiety and survival mechanisms, then telling them to slow down is not going to solve the problem. If asking for help activates a deeply learned belief that people are unreliable, then a delegation isn't necessarily going to fix that immediately. So the question again is not, what should I do differently? Tell me how to fix this. It's asking yourself questions more along the lines of, why does doing something differently feel so threatening to me in the first place? That's the key word. What fear or worry or anxiety is it activating within me? And that is the level where change in my coaching becomes so much more relevant, important, sustainable, and interesting, to be honest, because most high achieving women I work with, they don't have an information problem. They think they do, but they don't, right? Like, let me say that again. They know things. The lack of information is not the problem. They've read the books. They've listened to the podcast. They've gone to therapy. They have access to the resources. They are freaking smart and self-aware. And yet that awareness does not automatically equate to change behavior when it's deeply ingrained, because insight is not the same as integration, especially when it comes to creating real safety. So I want you to understand the nuance of what I'm trying to explain very briefly in a short podcast episode. Like, the goal of this work is not to strip away everything trauma has taught you, including your drive and ambition for a better life. I don't want you to become less resilient or less resourceful. And when I work with high achieving women, I'm not trying to turn them into people who suddenly don't care about success. Like, I want them to win. I want you to make money. I want you to hit goals. I want you to get the leadership role. I want you to have it all. And I believe you can. But the goal is for the ambition to become a choice instead of a compulsion. Again, I'm dropping some one-liners, y'all. I'm going to repeat that. The goal is for your ambition to become a choice, not a compulsion. I want you to work incredibly hard because you decide something matters to you, and be able to stop when you need to. I want you to be capable of doing things independently and be able to receive support. I want you to have high standards, but not let your self-worth collapse when something isn't perfect. I want you to stay resilient, but I don't want you to tolerate pain or discomfort because you can. This is what moving from survival into self-trust actually looks like, and it creates a completely different form of safety. It's an internal sense of safety versus an external form of safety. And you might be thinking, this is great information, Jess, but WTF? Like, what the hell do I do with this? So if this episode is resonating with you, I want you to start by identifying one trait that you are proud of that may also have a survival component attached to it. It could be something that we've already covered today, or something that you just know about yourself and your history. Maybe it's something along the lines of, I'm incredibly independent. So if that's the case, ask yourself, where is this independence serving me? And where has this independence become an inability to need anyone? Where am I not able to be healthily interdependent? These are the types of questions that help you discern the origin of the trait or the behavior, and eventually evaluating the necessity of it now. Here's another example. Maybe you're like, you know what? I can handle a lot. Great. So ask yourself, where has this capacity made you resilient? And where are you confusing your ability to tolerate something with evidence that you should? And here's another question for you. If I knew I was already safe, if I knew that I was already inherently worthy or capable or enough right now, would I still be doing it this way? Would I still be operating in the same way? Not would I still want success, I want that for you, but would you pursue it in the same way? And that distinction can tell you a lot. Now, I opened up this episode self-disclosing a little bit about my childhood, so bringing it back to that really quickly, one of the biggest shifts for me personally was recognizing that healing does not mean erasing or abandoning the version of me who survived. Like, she is a gangster, she is a G, and I actually have tremendous respect and appreciation for her. She figured out how to navigate things that she should have never been responsible for figuring out at a really young age, and she did the best she could with the situation she was given. She low-key protected me and got me out of situations and into circumstances that I am so grateful for now, and those adaptations contributed to the woman I am genuinely proud of being today. But respecting a survival strategy does not mean that I have to keep using it forever. And that is the point that I hit a few years ago. At some point, you have to say, like, thank you so much, and I don't need this anymore. So for me and a lot of my clients, what this sounds like is, hey, I can still deeply care without overfunctioning in this relationship. I can still be responsible without taking responsibility for everything and everyone all the time. I can still be resilient without making my life unnecessarily hard because I can survive hard things, so let me do it. And this is what I want for other high achieving women. I don't just want you to build the life, I want you to experience the success you work so hard for without immediately fearing you're going to lose it. I want you to enjoy what you've created without feeling like it's never enough. I want you to be present in your relationships instead of constantly scanning for the next threat or micromanaging everyone so that you feel okay. I want you to be able to rest and relax and play without feeling like you need to earn it. Like, that is freedom. And for a lot of high achievers, that's your next level. Not necessarily just more success, but learning how to safely hold the success you've created and continue creating more success without sacrificing the things that are important to you because you're operating out of a state of survival. And this is exactly the work I specialize in case you can't tell. Like, again, I work with professional women who have already proven they are intelligent, they are capable, resilient, and able to create results. Like, they do not need to be quote unquote more successful. They've already figured that out and they're well on the path to keep crushing it. Our work is figuring out where the same internal patterns that initially helped them become successful are now slowing them down. Maybe it's creating unnecessary pressure. Maybe it's affecting their relationship. Maybe it's making their leadership harder or capping their income or impact. Maybe it's preventing them from actually enjoying the life they work so hard to build. And what we do is we look underneath the behavior and we create new, healthier, more sustainable adaptations, if you will, so you can continue growing your income, your impact, your leadership, your relationships, just your life in general without requiring that survival mode and all that stress that got you here. So if you heard yourself in this episode and you're ready to take the work deeper, my one-on-one coaching schedule is currently open. You can book a consultation with me at www.chatwithjess.com. The link is in the show notes. And just stay tuned because I actually have a podcast episode coming out in a few weeks and a new free training that is going to blow your mind where I break this down even deeper. So I'm super excited to release that. Stay tuned for that. But as always, I hope you found today's episode helpful. If so, please leave us a 5-star review. Share this with someone who could really use it. This is the conversation that needs to be happening. And hit subscribe so that you never miss another episode to help you master the art and skill of coaching.